The atmosphere in the bipartisan Innovation and Economic Summit was already charged, but no one could have foreseen the explosion that was about to unfold. Stacey Abrams, the Democratic titan renowned for her voting rights advocacy, rose from the panel table, her eyes blazing with intensity. Across from her sat Elon Musk, the tech entrepreneur and CEO, whose calm exterior often masked a mind ready to challenge the room's deepest assumptions. The conference was billed as a rare gathering to bridge divides between political leaders and the private sector on urgent economic issues, inflation, job growth, and the future of innovation. But it was teetering on the edge of chaos. As Musk delivered a pointed challenge to Abrams's vision, her face hardened. Then, in a moment that stunned the crowd into silence, she leaned forward and commanded, "Get out." The word reverberated through the hall like a thunderclap. Phones whipped out instantly, their cameras capturing every second. What Musk said next wouldn't just shock the room. It would send ripples across the nation, setting the stage for a defining moment in public discourse. The summit had been pitched as a rare opportunity for collaboration, a place where lawmakers, innovators, and economists could tackle the pressing struggles facing Americans: skyrocketing costs, stagnant wages, shrinking opportunities. Abrams had taken the stage first. Her presence was commanding, her speech a passionate defense of voting rights as the cornerstone of democracy. She spoke of voter suppression, gerrymandering, and the need to protect every citizen's voice. The Democratic side of the room erupted in applause, donors nodding in approval. Then came Musk's turn. He stood slowly, adjusting his jacket, his unassuming posture hiding the sharpness of his words. Known for his direct, no-nonsense style, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I respect the fight for voting rights," he began, his voice even. "But let's be real about what's keeping people up at night. It's not just whether they can cast a ballot. It's whether that ballot will actually lead to a better life." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Musk wasn't dismissing Abrams outright, but his shift toward economic priorities, affordable housing, the future of work, and relief from crushing inflation landed like a direct challenge to her narrative. "Democracy's foundation is the vote," he continued, "but its purpose is to deliver results, jobs that pay, schools that teach, communities that thrive." The air grew heavier. Abrams leaned forward, her expression tightening. Donors exchanged glances, some intrigued, others clearly unsettled. Journalists began typing furiously, sensing the moment was about to ignite. The room had gone unnervingly still after Abrams's sharp get-out. Every camera phone in the hall was pointed at the stage now, the hum of recording apps filling the silence. Musk leaned back in his chair, hands clasped loosely in his lap. He didn't flinch, didn't look rattled. If anything, the corner of his mouth curled upward in the faintest suggestion of a smirk, not of arrogance, but of someone who had been in high-pressure standoffs before. "I'm not leaving," he said calmly, his voice carrying across the room without the aid of a microphone. "I think the American people deserve to hear more than one side of the story." Gasps rippled through the audience. Abrams's gaze locked onto him, unwavering. "This isn't your stage to hijack," she fired back. "This is about protecting democracy, not pushing your billionaire agenda." Musk straightened slightly. "And democracy isn't about silencing someone because you don't like what they have to say," he replied. "If we're talking about protecting people, we need to talk about the economy they live in, not just the votes they cast." A few in the crowd clapped, cautiously at first, as if testing the waters. Others stayed stone-faced, eyes darting between Abrams and Musk, like they were watching a high-stakes chess match. Abrams's voice rose. "This summit is about safeguarding rights that are under attack. The right to vote is the foundation. Without it, all those economic goals you're talking about don't matter." Musk shook his head slightly. "And without economic stability, all the voting rights in the world won't keep people from struggling to survive. They're connected. You can't address one and ignore the other." The moderator, looking increasingly uneasy, shifted in his seat but made no move to intervene. The tension between the two had become the event's gravitational center, pulling every gaze and camera lens toward them. Somewhere in the back, a reporter whispered to another. This just became the headline. The tension inside the summit hall was no longer just palpable, it was suffocating. The air felt charged, as if one more spark could set the whole place ablaze. Cameras were still rolling from every angle. Reporters hunched forward, their fingers flying over keyboards to catch every word. Stacey Abrams leaned forward, her palms flat on the table, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "You've made billions off the backs of workers," she said, her voice rising just enough to carry across the crowded hall. "And now you want to lecture the rest of us about economic justice. Please, spare me the billionaire morality speech." A murmur of approval came from a cluster of supporters on her side of the room, but Musk didn't flinch. He sat with his hands clasped in front of him, his posture relaxed, but his eyes locked on hers like a laser. "I've built companies that employ hundreds of thousands of people," he began, his voice measured but unyielding. "Not just engineers in Silicon Valley, factory workers in Nevada, technicians in Texas, suppliers all over the country, people whose livelihoods depend on innovation and production. And I've done it without leaning on taxpayers to keep the lights on." The reaction was immediate. One half of the room erupted into applause, while the other half booed loudly. The contrast was jarring, a split right down the middle. Abrams seized on the moment. "You've also fought against unions, resisted regulations meant to protect workers, and treated labor like a variable cost on a spreadsheet. Don't stand here and pretend you're the champion of the working class when your track record says otherwise." Musk's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "You talk about the working class like they're a prop in a political ad," he countered. "I talk to them every single day. I walk the factory floors. I've listened to the stories of people who work double shifts so their kids can have a better life. And what keeps them up at night isn't whether a politician gave a stirring speech. It's whether they can keep their homes, pay for healthcare, and know their job will still be there tomorrow." Gasps came from the audience. A few people clapped hesitantly, unsure whether they were breaking an unspoken rule in the highly partisan crowd. Abrams's eyes narrowed. "You're changing the subject because you don't want to talk about the voter suppression laws that keep certain voices out of power, laws that help maintain the very economic systems you profit from." Musk leaned forward slightly now, his voice steady but carrying an edge. "I'm not changing the subject. I'm saying you can't talk about justice in America without talking about all of it. Voting rights, yes, but also economic opportunity, job security, education. If you ignore one piece, the whole thing collapses." The moderator, seated between them, looked like he was trying to decide whether to step in or let the spectacle play out. His eyes darted toward the event organizers off stage, but no signal came. The audience wasn't just watching, they were leaning in, phones up, whispering furiously to each other. A reporter in the front row muttered under his breath, "This isn't just a policy debate anymore. This is two completely different visions for America colliding in real time." Abrams crossed her arms, her voice taking on a tone of finality. "Democracy is the foundation. Without the right to vote, every other issue, including your precious economic growth, is irrelevant." Musk didn't hesitate. "And without economic stability, all the voting rights in the world won't stop people from falling through the cracks. You can't cast a ballot from a homeless shelter and expect it to magically fix your life." The room broke into overlapping noise, applause, boos, shouts of agreement, mutters of disapproval. The moderator raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd, but the energy was far beyond his control. This wasn't just another panel discussion anymore. It was a political earthquake, and the aftershocks would be felt far beyond the walls of that summit hall. By now, the summit hall was more of an arena than a forum. The boundaries between debate, performance, and confrontation had completely dissolved. Every seat was filled, and people were standing along the walls, just to witness the clash unfolding on stage. Stacey Abrams adjusted the microphone in front of her and leaned in, her voice lower now, almost like a warning. "Mr. Musk, this isn't about silencing you. It's about accountability. You've amassed unprecedented wealth and influence, and with that comes responsibility, not just to shareholders, but to the people whose lives your decisions affect." Musk didn't break eye contact, and I take that responsibility seriously. But responsibility doesn't mean agreeing with every piece of legislation or every political narrative just because it's popular in certain circles. Sometimes leadership means saying the uncomfortable thing. A woman in the audience stood up and shouted, "That's right," followed by a man on the opposite side yelling, "Sit down." The tension in the air thickened. Abrams seized on the disruption. "You think discomfort is the same as leadership? Tell that to the communities crushed under corporate greed. or to the workers who can't unionize because of the barriers your companies put in place. Musk leaned forward, his elbows on the table now. And tell that to the innovators who wouldn't have jobs at all if we didn't take risks. Risks that no politician was willing to take. If we'd waited for government approval to innovate, we'd still be stuck in the 20th century. The audience murmured loudly. Some clapped, others booed. The split was so sharp it felt like the room could physically tear in two. The moderator tried again to restore order. Let's keep our comments focused on solutions, not just grievances. But neither Abrams nor Musk seemed ready to step back. Abrams spoke again, slower this time, her tone calculated. Here's the difference between you and me, Mr. Musk. I fight for those who don't have a seat at the table. You build tables and decide who gets to sit at them. Musk's expression hardened, but he answered without hesitation. And if you want to make real change, you don't just demand a seat, you build your own table. You empower people to create, to work, to take control of their own futures. That's the difference between giving speeches and creating opportunities. Gasps and scattered applause filled the hall. The moment had turned into something far larger than a policy dispute. It was a battle over the very definition of leadership and responsibility. And everyone in the room knew it wasn't over yet. The room had the hum of a live wire. Every person tuned into the exchange, as if missing a single word would mean losing the thread of history in the making. The moderator, clearly out of his depth, sat back in his chair, letting the two figures command the stage. The cameras zoomed in. Every news outlet knew they were capturing a moment that would dominate headlines for days. Stacey Abrams shifted in her seat, drawing a slow breath. Mr. Musk, you keep talking about opportunity like it's freely available to everyone, but we both know that's not the reality for millions of Americans. People can't innovate when they're drowning in debt, when they can't afford healthcare, when their public schools are crumbling. Musk's reply came without hesitation, his tone direct but not raised. I'm not denying the challenges. What I'm saying is that opportunity is built, not handed out. And the fastest way to kill it is to create a system where risk-taking is punished and success is treated like a crime. A murmur ran through the crowd, some nodding, others whispering sharply. Abrams shook her head. It's not about punishing success. It's about making sure the system isn't rigged, so that only a handful of people can succeed. The rules should work for the people on the ground, not just for those already at the top. Musk leaned in, his voice taking on a quieter, almost personal tone. And I agree, the rules should work for everyone. But in my experience, the people who rise the fastest are the ones who don't wait for the rules to change before they act. They build anyway. They fight anyway. There was a pause, not because the argument was over, but because both sides had laid everything bare. The crowd, sensing the weight of the moment, fell into a hush. A man from the back of the hall suddenly stood and shouted, "Them work together. If you both care, stop fighting and fix it." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, both Musk and Abrams broke eye contact, glancing toward the source of the voice. It was a reminder, maybe to them, maybe to everyone watching, that the real issue wasn't who could win the argument, but whether anything would change after the lights went out and the cameras stopped rolling. The moderator cleared his throat, bringing the session to a close. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our panel. Please join me in thanking our speakers. The applause was loud but uneven, half standing ovation, half restrained clapping. The divide was still there, unhealed, but as Musk and Abrams stood, shook hands for the cameras, and turned to leave, the energy in the room made one thing certain. The conversation wasn't ending here. It was just beginning.